Welcome to The Real Story. We have a jam-packed show for you today and lots of ground to cover. George Papadopoulos is here to discuss whether or not the Clintons will finally face the reckoning they deserve. Plus, a trial lawyer and former judge will share his thoughts about the new immigration enforcement operation happening in Maine, where things are heating up quickly. And we'll discuss the fate of Don Lemon. It's all coming up right now on The Real Story. It turns out there's a new caste system right here in America, and it's plain to see. If you want to know who really runs the show in this country, don't look at the laws, look at who's allowed to break them. So on Sunday, the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota was invaded by a mob of radical anti-ICE activists mid-worship. And no, they did not come to pray, they came to hunt. And their target? Pastor David Easterwood, a man they targeted simply because he has a day job serving his country boldly as a director for ICE. They screamed at families, they shouted, they lost their minds, they terrified children, and worst of all, they turned a house of God, a truly sacred environment, into a political theater. Now, for just one moment, folks, it really looked like these invaders might be brought to justice. The Trump administration's DOJ, led by Pam Bondi and Harmeet Dillon, moved fast and unapologetically. In fact, they arrested the ringleaders, Nakima Levy Armstrong, Chantel Allen, and a TikTok agitator named William Kelly. So we had 3 people in handcuffs. Finally, some real consequences, accountability. But wait, there was actually a 4th ringleader in that sanctuary, and you know exactly who he is. He's the guy who looked you in the eye, right to your face, and told you that Jussie Smollett, the sociopath who orchestrated a hate hoax to make it look like he was beaten and lynched by 2 MAGA white guys in Chicago in 2019 during a snowstorm while holding a Subway sandwich, was somehow a victim. Don Lemon. No, he was not just observing, he was right in the scrum of it all, harassing the pastor and inciting the chaos. And federal prosecutors wanted him charged, and rightfully so, but a federal magistrate judge, Douglas Micco, remember that name by the way, blocked the move, saying Lemon's behavior was protected speech. Interesting. So apparently Judge Micco believes the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution entitles you to storm onto private property and cause a scene. Watch this lunatic in action.
What do you think of this?
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
okay, but listen, we live in there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me though.
We're here to worship Jesus.
Yes.
That's why we're here.
Yes.
Okay. That's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a
no
Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
Talk about a complete violation. If you or I march into a church or a synagogue or even a mosque and started screaming political slogans, we'd be in a jail cell before the sun went down. But Don Lemon, the man who spent years peddling the biggest hoaxes in cable news history, gets a special pass and courtesy of a federal judge. Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi is reportedly enraged, and frankly, she should be. We all should be as Americans. Now, they arrested the foot soldiers, but the celebrity activist gets to walk free? How is that justice? The answer is it's not. And President Trump knows this, by the way, and he spoke about the issues the other night, and here's what he had to say.
So this is what the people are trying to protect, because all ICE wants to do is get them out of our country. Bring them to prisons and jails and mental institutions from where they came. That's all they want to do. They're patriots, and they have to be abused by guys like Don Lemon, who's a loser, lightweight. I saw him the way he walked in that church. It was terrible. I have such respect for that pastor. He was so calm. He was so nice. He was just accosted. What they did in that church was horrible yesterday.
Spot on, completely horrible. And as for that despicable lizard person, Don Lemon, I imagine he would be ashamed of himself too. But then again, one has to have shame in order to be ashamed, and Don Lemon has proven yet again that he's a shameless and unserious outrage peddler. So, in the eyes of the American legal system, being a failed CNN anchor is now a get-out-of-jail-free card. And here to talk with us all about is constitutional attorney and GOP candidate for Congress in the great state of Florida, Keith Gross. Keith, I have to get your response to this situation. It is ridiculous, and I want Don Lemon arrested.
Me too. It is ridiculous. We're seeing a two-tiered system of justice where apparently First Amendment rights to the left include the right to interrupt churches, block highways, and attack ICE officers. They don't seem to understand that the First Amendment does not include the right to protest. It includes the right to speak and peaceably assemble, not to overtake someone else's property or interfere with their freedom of religion.
Yeah, bingo. And rights that are important, by the way. Everyone knows that the First Amendment is protecting something that's sacred. Peaceable assembly, right, speech, these are good things. And Don knows that, by the way. I think he's read the U.S. Constitution. He was on CNN for years. He can't be that dumb, Keith, can he?
I wouldn't think so, but the left has gotten really comfortable breaking the law because they so frequently avoid consequences, because what President Trump talks about with the deep state is real, and we're seeing it unfold even now, where people are escaping the consequences of their actions. I don't think you expected that when you became a journalist you were going to have diplomatic immunity, but to the left, that's apparently what they're expecting.
Well said. Now, as for these three individuals who have been apprehended, tell us your analysis of the charges. Do you think they're spot on or not? And what do you think is going to happen next for them?
Well, I think they're spot on, and no matter how much a judge tries to interfere with this process, ultimately charging decisions are the venue and the prerogative of the executive branch. The judge might refuse to issue certain arrest warrants or other things, but ultimately the executive branch will bring charges and will elicit testimony and bring evidence to prove those charges. And if they prove those charges, it's not up to the judge. It's going to be up to a jury, and hopefully we will see justice done. I mean, I know that our Justice Department is working towards that, and President Trump's not going to back down. He's going to keep pushing to make sure that everyone's rights are protected.
I would agree, and I would also add that I don't think Harmeet Dillon or Pam Bondi are interested in backing down either, because they understand this is reckless, it's egregious, and somebody has to do something. However, to your point, you don't have a crystal ball, but as far as a decision from a potential jury here, how do you think that's going to go? Because I think a jury actually might side with them, because this is so partisan in modern America, and things have become so twisted that we even think this is. The fact we even have to have this conversation, to me, Keith, is a giant red flag, and to me, it's not a good sign.
Well, you're bringing up a really valid point, and we've seen it happen already in D.C. with the person that threw a sandwich in the face of a law enforcement officer. There was no question that they committed a crime, and they were not held accountable, and that's really part of the problem. We've got leftist politicians and activist judges that enable lawless activity. Every time we see a video on the internet of people blocking the roadway and interfering with an ICE operation, and we don't see those people arrested, what message does that send? That tells all these other leftists that they can get out there and cause problems with no consequence.
Yes, it does.
They've gotten far too comfortable.
And so let's talk about those people. So for roughly, I don't know, Keith, maybe half the country out there that looks at this and says, it's no problem, it's totally fine, I genuinely want to know what you would tell them, because I know people in my own life who look at this and they say, what's the big deal, Keith? Why are we even talking about this? So for people out there like that, our fellow American citizens, voters, Keith, what would you tell them?
America is built on the idea of the rule of law. We are to be governed by laws passed by our representatives in Congress. And if we just allow certain cities or certain states to ignore federal law because they don't like it, we're no longer an effective union of states. We have chaos. When we have laws that aren't enforced, it undermines everyone's respect for the law, because, like I was mentioning, when these people go out and they commit crimes quite visibly and they're not held accountable, they feel like they're allowed to commit crimes and get away with it. And one crime leads to another. There's this tendency to escalate. Maybe they start out by blocking the street, and before you know it, they're ramming ICE officers in their vehicles. They're setting ICE vehicles on fire and dragging ICE officers down the road. They're causing serious bodily harm and death. This is the sort of thing that happens when people lose respect for the law. It goes incrementally to chaos, and we can't allow that to happen. We're either a nation of laws or this republic will crumble.
So that's what I really want to get your thoughts on, is what happens next. You mentioned blocking traffic, obstructing ICE, trying to take their weapons off of them, right, while they're in uniform, in the line of duty. Then you escalate that further to shouting at them, physical altercations, even trying to run them over with your vehicle. If you can get away with all of that, Keith, then what happens next? Where is the line? At what point will even the most radical Democrats in this country say, enough is enough, we have to stop this?
I'm not sure they will, because they want power. They want to see Trump fail more than they want to see America exist. I'm hopeful that the president will eventually invoke the Insurrection Act if the left doesn't come around and actually start enforcing the law. I'm hopeful that we will see this come to an end, because if we don't see this come to an end under the Trump administration, I don't know that we'll ever see it come to an end. We saw flare-ups, back in the BLM days where they were burning down buildings and breaking windows and looting stores. This lawlessness continues until some force for good stops it. I believe President Trump and his Justice Department can be that force for good, and they're working to do that. So I hope, like many Americans, that they are successful, because if they're not, I pray for the future of this country.
Yeah, agreed. Honestly, Keith, my fear is that we're already past the point of no return. I could be wrong, for the record, and I hope that I'm wrong, but something in my gut just tells me we may be too far gone. And again, I hope as a America-loving, God-fearing patriot that I am so wrong about that, Keith, with every fiber of my being. However, you mentioned the Insurrection Act. President Trump is actively considering invoking that in Minnesota. Could you tell us about what that act really means in layman's terms and whether or not it would be justified?
So generally, people have the idea that the president cannot use the military to perform law enforcement operations. And that's generally true, with several exceptions in statute and in the Constitution. One of the big exceptions, of course, is the Insurrection Act. If there's an insurrection or an uprising that can't be controlled or put down with the use of ordinary forces, so we might say ordinary forces include law enforcement at the disposal of the president or other forces, there's some debate there. But the bottom line is it opens up the president's ability to deploy any military asset he sees fit, almost as though we're putting down an internal invasion of the United States. It's like it's a matter of national security. Think back to Civil War days when one state was at war with another. That's almost what we're seeing in effective terms with some of these sanctuary cities. They are at war with the federal government.
Okay, now final 30 seconds. I know you're also running for Congress in the great state of Florida. People want to know about it and what you're really running on, so could you just give us a few seconds about that, please?
So I'm running for Congress in Florida's 2nd Congressional District in the Panhandle. Our current congressman is retiring and will not seek re-election, so I've announced that I am running. I'm running to back up President Trump in Congress to ensure that we put America First policies into law and to ensure that I can introduce each and every one of the president's executive orders as a bill to pass through the legislature so that the next president can't undo it. We've got to protect the Trump policies and protect the gains he's made, or we really might not have a country left. Like you said, I'm not willing to give up on this country. I think we can save it, and I'm going to do everything I can to save it.
Understood, and thank you for that, and for your time today, Keith. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Coming up next on The Real Story, a trial lawyer, former judge, and former police officer will give us his expert analysis on Operation Catch of the Day, the newest immigration enforcement operation happening in Maine, where things are heating up very fast, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.